What is happening, people? It is Brian Alsruhe, NeverState.com, and today's video is going to be all about your hamstrings, because your hamstrings are a problem area for strongman, for powerlifters, for bodybuilders, for everybody. That's probably because of two reasons. The first one is that you don't spend a lot of time looking at them, unless you do, weirdo. So they oftentimes tend to get neglected. And then the other reason is that a lot of people can't actually feel their hamstrings fire. They'll feel them stretch when they're going down on like a stiff-legged deadlift or something, but they don't actually feel that kind of almost cramping up, the weight actually being pulled up by the hamstrings instead of just kind of getting through it. So I thought what a good video for some people would be is that I would go over 5 different things that I personally used that are like cues and tips and drills that you can do to get your hamstrings firing more effectively for your big compound movements. And then secondly, the second part of the video, what I want to go into is 4 of my favorite top assistance exercises for the hamstrings that have the most carryover for size and strength and everything else. And for those of you who did not know, having strong hamstrings is one of the biggest factors in having a big deadlift and a big squat and having legs big enough to have problems fitting into your jeans. So if any of that sounds good to you, continue watching this video. I'm gonna get started on those factors now. All right, so as I just mentioned, one of the biggest factors in not being able to grow big, strong hamstrings is that you're not having any sort of mind muscle connection. Like I said, maybe you feel them stretching, but you're not actually feeling them activate and doing the pulling. So here are 5 things that are gonna help you out. The first one I actually read not that long ago in an article on Elite FTS, and I wish I could remember the author's name. I will go back and look it up and put it down in the notes, but for right now, all that you guys need to know is that this is a simple drill that you can do with a 45-pound plate, 25-pound plate, or 35-pound plate, depending on how wide your squat stance is. Now you can throw this in as part of your warm-up, as just a body weight thing to get things firing, or even in some of your warm-up sets, you can do something like this. But the whole idea is that you're gonna stick that plate between your feet. Now you're gonna take your heels and you're gonna be squeezing that plate as tightly as you can while you're still pointing your toes slightly outward, because your knees are gonna have to track outward. And when you go down, you don't want those collapsing in. So you're gonna be pushing those outside while your heels are trying to squeeze inside. Now, the first thing you're gonna notice as you start to descend for this squat is that your hamstrings are going to start winding up and almost feel like they're gonna cramp. Now, if this is the first time you've ever felt this in a squat, that means that you're probably leaving a lot of weight out there, because your hamstrings are probably being pretty just passive, letting gravity take you down in the squat instead of actively winding up, so hopefully it can rebound out of the hole and give you some pop. But using this really basic trick is an excellent way to get your mind and your hamstrings kind of linked up, so that when you go into your other exercises, hopefully they're already kind of not cramping, but they know that they've done something, so they'll kind of just naturally fire a little bit more. Second thing that I encourage you to do if you're having trouble feeling your hamstrings fire is to shorten your range of motion so you're never taking tension off of those muscle groups. So if you take something like a glute ham raise or a stiff-legged deadlift, typically on the stiff-legged deadlift, when you stand all the way up, ideally that position ends with your shoulders slam back, your butt's tight, your posterior chain, everything's linked up. It looks beautiful, right? However, if you're not feeling your hamstrings, maybe that could be a mistake. Instead, what I'd rather see you do, just for a little bit, not all the time, but for a little bit, shorten up that range of motion so you're literally only going up about 90% to lockout. That way you're still keeping weight and time under tension on those hamstrings, and you're absolutely going to start feeling them more and more. Which actually leads me right into the third thing that I would encourage you to do, and that is stick little smaller reps inside of your normal reps. So like 1.5 reps. The whole idea here is that like on a stiff-legged deadlift, instead of going down till you feel those hamstrings stretch, get wound up, and then you rebound, come all the way back up. Now what I want to see you do is go all the way down to that point, come part of the way back up, go back down to that bottom, and then go all the way back up to the top. So whole idea here is that you can do that with a glute ham raise, a good morning, anything involving your hamstrings. Really, you can do it with anything, but slowing everything down and increasing the time under tension, especially when you're trying to establish that mind muscle connection, can do a lot to get you further along. And doing like 1.5 reps or sticking reps inside of reps is an awesome way to do that. But don't be stupid. Don't do that on your normal movements. This is just for like assistant stuff where it's a little bit easier, a little bit lighter, and where you're more focused on not moving as much weight as possible. You're more focused on just actually using that muscle. The fourth thing that I encourage you to do is before one of the bigger like good morning compound hamstring exercises is do a smaller isolation exercise beforehand. Now, if you have strong hamstrings, this could be as simple as like a glute ham raise. If glute ham raises are challenging for you, then maybe it is something like a lying leg curl. Now, don't get it twisted. This isn't like 2003. We're not talking about like pre-exhausting muscles, bodybuilding style. What I am saying is that you're just doing enough work to get those muscles firing. So I like to have it feel not like it's like knotting up, but when I get off like a glute ham raise, I want my walk to be just slightly funny because then I know that my hamstrings are already kind of jumpy, they're already kind of listening. And then if I go into something like a good morning or a stiff-legged deadlift, it is amazing how much more I can actually feel that muscle. Now, again, I'm not trying to go into my set of good mornings tired. I'm trying to go into it primed or ready. Much like doing the conditioning before my strength stuff, I'm not doing so much that I'm so exhausted I can't do it, but I'm doing enough that the things that I want awake and ready to go are awake and ready to go. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do here. Fifth and final thing that I would encourage that you do if you're having trouble feeling your hamstrings is add some resistance bands to the bar on some of these movements. So whether it be a glute ham raise, a stiff-legged deadlift, a good morning, sometimes the weight itself is a harder thing to actually feel that pressure on your hamstrings with than something more like accommodating resistance, like a band or a cable or an exercise machine. That's why a lot of people feel their hamstrings on something like a prone leg curl, but they will not on a stiff-legged deadlift. That's what we're trying to remedy here. With an exercise like good mornings or stiff-legged deadlifts, a lot of people get overwhelmed because they feel like that weight kind of falls on them all at once and kind of folds them in half. But if you use something like bands, where you have a smoother kind of accommodating resistance, so as you go up, the intensity increases, then a lot of people are more able to keep that mind-muscle connection instead of just getting all that weight dumped on them. Anyway, let's move on to the exercises. All right, so the first two exercises I want to talk about, I'm going to lump together because the movement patterns are so similar, and that is going to be the stiff-legged deadlift and the good morning. So for most people, there are plenty of differences between the two, but for most people that are at the beginner intermediate stage, the movement pattern is going to be almost exactly the same. The only difference is going to be either the bar is going to be on your back or in your hands. But there's a lot of similarities, so we're going to cover them together. Now, the first thing I want to say is when I say stiff-legged deadlift, you could use Romanian deadlift because it's really not that much difference between the two at all. But another variation I like a lot is the sumo stance stiff-legged deadlift with your toes pointed out but your legs also wider, because you'll feel your hamstrings in a completely different place there. That's something else I did want to add to all hamstring exercises is play around with your foot position, how close together they are, how far apart they are, whether your toes are pointed out, whether your toes are pointed in, because you will feel different parts of your hamstrings firing at different times. So with a good morning, your feet might need to be in a different position than they would be with a stiff-legged deadlift, but you're gonna need to do a little bit of test and evaluation to see what works best for you. Now, I know a lot of people are not a fan of the stiff-legged deadlift, and I know a lot of people are definitely not a fan of the good morning, but I did do an entire video about the good morning that explains it, breaks it all down. Definitely search that if you're having problems there. But both are just such excellent exercises for assistance when it comes to the hamstrings. Not dangerous at all. The problem, as with most things, is that people are doing it incorrectly. A lot of people think with a good morning, you're just sticking a bar on your back and then you're going to bend over, which typically doesn't end very well for anybody. In both the stiff-legged deadlift and the good morning, you still need the basic ideas of like keeping your neck neutral, keeping your chest high. You need to breathe and brace like your leg depends on it. You need to flex your butt. All the things that you normally do on a deadlift, you still need to be doing here. People forget about that. Now, here is the biggest difference though, is that since your legs are going to be straighter, you will not be manipulating your legs to keep that bar in a path. Instead, something's gonna have to give. So to get that bar over top the middle of your foot, you simply need to push your butt back. If you're on a stiff-legged deadlift and you bend forward with that bar, or if you're on a good morning and you just simply start bowing forward, trust me, that bar is gonna float out in front of your foot and you are in for a long day. As with both these movements and every other deadlift that you're going to do, the bar needs to stay over top of the middle of your foot. So I found the easiest way to get people to learn this is to do a regular deadlift for your first rep. Once you're up there, rebreathe, brace, get everything set. Now, all I want you to do is keep that bar laying on your legs. It's gonna stay in contact with your legs pretty much the entire time. Simply start pushing your butt back. Now, think about your big Superman ass or your Batman sign or whoever you're into. That thing needs to be pointed at the sky for as long as you can. Continue to bend over, feel those hamstrings stretch and wind up. Once you feel it's time to stand back up, reverse the motion. Now, if you have any friends, congratulations, you're better than me. But if you do not, then take a camera and record yourself exactly from the side. And you're gonna be able to look at the middle of your shoe and where the end of that barbell is going. And if it is floating anywhere other than directly up and down over top the middle of your foot, then you are doing a lot of things wrong and you're risking injury, as well as not sticking the tension exactly where it needs to be, which again, is the entire point of this whole thing. So when you are doing either one of these motions, just make sure that bar is staying over top the middle of your foot and you are completely safe. Keep your breathing, stay braced, just push your butt back, and that makes all the difference in the world. Third exercise I want to talk to you guys about is the Rubish Deadlift. Now, this comes from Pete Rubish because that is where I saw it. I've seen other people refer to it as the Rubish Deadlift. However, Pete is a cool enough guy that he's humble and he's like, man, I didn't come up with that. I saw it somewhere else. It's not mine. However, congratulations, Pete. You got a deadlift because I don't know what else to call it. And I can't really fit 45-degree back raise deadlift thing Yeah. Anyway, guys, not to use the word that I'm defining in the definition, but that's exactly what it is. It is just a deadlift off of a 45-degree back raise. Now, depending on the height of your 45-degree back raise, you may need to lift up the front like I do to increase the range of motion so you can actually get a full rep in. However, these are so brutally hard on your hamstrings, I swear to you, it feels like it's going to rip it right off the bone because this basically takes everything else out of the movement. Now again, play around with your foot position, your toe position, all of that is gonna matter on this. Couple things they need to keep in mind though. Number one, it's going to be a lot lighter than you want to, so prepare to be humbled. Number two, when you are adjusting the pad on the front, you have to be very, very careful for obvious reasons. But the third and most important is figuring out where your arm position needs to be to get this bar to come off the ground. So like you guys have seen me doing object lessons in my other deadlift tutorials, a bar will not leave the ground until it gets perpendicular with the ground, very much like a crane picking up a heavy object. So if you are too far out with this barbell, when you go to lift, it's gonna have to swing back before you lift it, or if you're too far back, it's gonna have to swing forward. Look, if you have a friend, like I mentioned earlier, have them look from the side. Your arm position should be virtually the exact same that it is in a conventional deadlift. The only thing here is that you need to make sure that when you're lifting, that bar is gonna travel directly up. That's pretty much a tough thing, but you'll probably get after like a rep, 2 rep sets week. Not gonna lie, it does take a little bit of a learning curve to figure that out. However, once you have it, this will absolutely annihilate your hamstrings. So thank you very much for Pete for introducing it to me. I hope that we get to do something in the future with collaborations. And the fourth and final, and arguably the best hamstring exercise out there, is the glute ham raise. Now the glute ham raise is often referred to as the pull up for the lower body, and I completely agree. I do these things all of the time. There's not really a leg day that does not end with at least some glute ham raises. Whenever people ask me if they're that important, yes, these are absolutely that important. They are one of the best things you could possibly do if you want to have lower body strength or posterior chain strength in the gym at all. However, I do know for some people these are very, very tough, but you can kind of remedy that by just taking a band and locking it off in the back and then kind of half guillotine, collarbone, brace thing, this rope around you, so you can get a little bit of assistance coming up and then slowly work down to lower resistance on the bands so eventually you can do them on your own. And then there's a whole other category of you who think these are super easy. So you guys can either stick the band around your neck the other way, or you can hold a plate behind your head, stick your arms out to the side, or even start elevating the bench so that just makes the movement more challenging in general. But the biggest problem with the glute ham raise is that a lot of people don't have them. Stupid gyms. So what you can do in replace of them is the Nordic hamstring curl. Now again, if you have a friend, they can hold your legs down and this works out excellent. However, if you're very much like me and you don't have any friends at all, what I encourage you to do is look around your gym till you can find something to wedge your legs underneath that is gonna hold solid so you can do some Nordic hamstring curls. I would recommend sticking some sort of pad underneath your knees. These are also a lot harder than you think they're going to be. However, I know a lot of people still can't figure out a way to do the Nordic hamstring curl. So what you can do instead is the gliding leg curl. Whole idea on this one is that you're basically going to get into an inverted row position, except you're gonna set up a box or stack some plates. From there, you put your heels up on that box, you're gonna glide up to it and then finish off with a hamstring curl. Now, I will say this is absolutely nothing compared to the Nordic hamstring curl. Nothing. However, if you can't figure the other two things out, something is better than nothing. All right, guys, so there you go. The only other thing that I'm gonna say about the hamstring before I go is that the hamstring is a big hunk of muscle, okay? So it needs some pretty high intensity to actually make it change. For that reason, you do need to use heavy weights. However, you can't mess up your form on these or else you're not gonna be using your hamstrings. The other parts of your posterior chain are gonna start taking over. So it needs to be light enough that you're actually using your hamstrings, but heavy enough to stimulate the muscle. So if you're pulling 135 with stiff-legged deadlifts, it's probably not going to be enough to really stimulate that. You're gonna need some low reps at very heavy weights, and then you're also gonna need some higher stuff that is going to be just kind of getting that pump and cramping them up and doing things like that. But guys, do not neglect heavy work on your hamstrings for your assistance stuff. If you do that, trust me, you're not gonna get the results that you would otherwise. But yep, that's pretty much what I got for you guys today. I hope some of you will find this helpful. Maybe one or two of you out there will actually feel your hamstrings do the work for the first time. Guys, I do enjoy making these videos, so I hope you enjoy watching them. If you guys like what you see and you do find them helpful, please share these, please subscribe. I am trying to grow the channel a good bit. If you guys did want to know how this channel survives, it is by personalized programs. So if you guys are looking for a program and you want me to write it, make sure you email me at neversate@gmail.com. We'll definitely hook that up. Again, that is how all this is possible. So to each and every single one of you that does that and I work with, I thank you guys so much. I'm living my dream and it's because of you. So guys, I will catch up with you later in the week. Until I do, go out, do something amazing, realize, keep working hard, people. Feel your hamstrings. I'll see you then.